The final moments of Thorin's life, that's one of the scenes that you think about from the minute I went in to meet Peter with a potential to play this role, because it was very moving to me when I read the book.
It's a very slight rewrite on the scene that, as it exists in the book. We moved it from Dale to a more personal place, which is on the battlefield, so that the two characters, it was just them, and also that Bilbo could hold on to the notion that maybe he could save him.
It was kind of spiritual. I just lay there and looked at the roof of the soundstage and listened to all the sounds.
It was one of those scenes where people are quite hushed around it, you know what I mean? Because it was 2.5 years, whatever, after we started shooting. It's the end of this character's journey. So that was, yeah, it was kind of given some weight, I think, on the set. It was kind of the culmination of their very rocky friendship, you know. They'd really been up and down the mountain with each other, you know, figuratively and literally.
The most difficult words for Thorin to say to Bilbo were, "I'm sorry that I've led you into such peril." It took me right back to the very first scene that I shot with him in Bag End, and the disdain with which Thorin held the Hobbit, yet their whole success has rested on a seemingly insignificant person, which is what I think Tolkien is writing about. I think it's the whole reason Tolkien wrote these books. It's his need to express that the simplest single person can somehow affect big change, and I think that that's captured in that one moment when Thorin apologizes and says thank you to him.
You did what only a true friend would do. Forgive me. I was too blind to see it.
I'm glad to have shared in your perils, Thorin. Each and every one of them. It is far more than any Baggins deserves.
That's the point that you know that you're going to end in good terms, and when he gives it to you, you can kind of relax and fade away in that last speech of it. Is that? Yeah. Okay.
Will you forgive me before I die? I think that's really the peak of Thorin's journey.
Phil, move the book. Go back to your books and your armchair. Plant your trees. Watch them grow. If more people valued harm above gold, the world would be a merrier place.
No, Thorin. Just one more moment. Just wait one more moment. The eagles are here, Thorin.
Well, I think when you grow up with characters like this, they change as you get older. They evolve, and you know, going back to the book at 40 years old, the same book that I read was read to me when I was 7, and it feels different, and these characters feel different, and then actually putting the costume on and trying to make that character live and breathe and walk and talk, and it's like you're given this responsibility to every other person that's read that book and that is just reading the book for the first time or has read it, you know, when they were 7. That's a responsibility, and so you have to own that for everyone, and I've tried to take that on, and you know, but I've only got my own imagination to work with, but it's served me well in the past, so I hope it will do again. Well, I think that was one of Tolkien's great achievements, that he didn't create he didn't really create myth. He created legend. So and that's what his full intention was, to create something that felt like it was of this earth, not somewhere else. In the same way that maybe C.S. Lewis did, is that Tolkien really wanted something that you might, as you read the Silmarillion or any of the early histories, you know, the evolution stories that he comes through with, it's you realise that he's looking for something much deeper, much more English, actually.
Yes.
And he wants to create a universe that you think may have existed. He created a religion, effectively, languages.
17 original languages Tolkien invented, which is crazy.
And I think his passion for language and the way that he used Nordic mythology is why the book feels so real and sustains over a long period of time, and will do. I would be very surprised if any of these stories get remade again, but I think Tolkien will be visualized on film. Maybe the Silmarillion, something like that. I mean, that would be a great challenge to see that book come to life. But
it would.
But it would be a tragedy if it didn't.
Did you read the Tolkien novel beforehand? Did you go back to the source material a lot?
Do you know what? You pretty much do everything you possibly can. So before filming starts, I went back to the book, which I'd read as a child, and I looked at as much Tolkien as I could, because he writes about all of his races in other materials. So I did all of that. And then when we got to Wellington, we went through an intense training period with a guy called Terry Notary, who I think is actually a Canadian. I think he trained with Cirque du Soleil. So he taught us how to become dwarves. So it was a certain way of walking, a secret sign language, sprinting with these massive heavy boots on, and because they have a different physicality to human beings. So that took 6 weeks until it was in our bodies. And so you start with the cerebral, and then you go to the physical, and then you just start working.
Talk to me about the daily prep. I mean, looking at you today, I wouldn't even recognize you how you look in the movie. So what kind of prep did you have to do in terms of makeup and the hair and everything? Yeah,
the makeup and hair and body was basically designed by Weta and applied by Tammy Lane, who's an Oscar-winning prosthetics artist, and Jennifer Stanfield, who did all the hair. And my face had been through like 7 different sculpts by an amazing sculptor at Weta called Jamie Beswarwick. So they really created a look for Thorin, which started quite extreme and slowly became more like my own face. So there's a little bit of me in there. But it was a 3-hour process every morning, because each prosthetic, you put it on, you take it off, and you chuck it in the bin. So it goes on and off every day. But I actually found it like it was part of my process of getting into character, is watching the character sort of forming in front of you.
You were really, really grumpy in that, though. I mean, if that was Snow White and the dwarves, you would be grumpy.
He is a bit of a grump, isn't he?
In a good way, though. In a good way. It comes round in the end.
We tried to soften him up a bit and give him a sense of humour, but it's not really there in the book. He is pretty cantankerous in that book.
Do that. And so I guess that was a great time for you all to bond as well. Because as a unit, all of the dwarves together.
Yeah, and we did a lot of improvisation, which was like we'd go out into the field and behave like a military group, where we sort of found our hierarchy, which was really useful.
Oh, it's really good. It's like I said, it's a fantastic movie. You must have spent a long time in New Zealand, which is no hardship.
Yeah, we were there for 18 months in total, and we go back this year for another 10 weeks of shooting, which I'm really looking forward to.
Oh, that would be brilliant, because of course it was supposed to be 2 movies, wasn't it?
Yes.
But you had so much material.
Yeah.
That it's going to be 3.
Yes, it is, and I think it's because of the format that he's shooting it in, the high frame rate and the 3D. He didn't want to put it onto an extended DVD, so he wanted everyone to go see it in the cinema, which is great. And all of the characters that come into the second film, like Beorn and the Elf King, it's so exciting.
To enter the mountain.
What of it? Were you a fan of the original Lord of the Rings trilogy, or?
Yeah, I was a huge fan. I'd read The Hobbit, I'd read The Lord of the Rings. So when Peter Jackson made his trilogy, I just couldn't wait to get in there.
Can you tell us a little bit about your character and what his journey is?
When you meet Thorin in the story, he's kind of burdened. He has a revenge quest that has been bequeathed to him by his grandfather and his father. But the character is really trying to inspire 13 other dwarves to come on a quest with him, because he can't raise an army to do it. The condition of Gandalf joining the quest is that he brings a hobbit, which he's very skeptical about doing.
Is it hard for you to connect with the character because he is in such an outworldly place?
The physical transformation was initially difficult, because you feel very, very small inside this big creation. And, when your face isn't your own, I had to work hard to make the face move. I found that I needed to stay with the character pretty much all day and concentrate pretty hard, because you never really knew when you were going to be called to set and to be asked to do something, because Peter just works quite organically and he likes to keep cameras rolling. The level of stamina was the highest I've ever worked at.
Cut the rope!
Jimmy.
Yes.
Richard. Welcome to the iTunes chat about The Hobbit. I just thought I'd start off by asking you, you've been shooting the film for about 2 years now, since principal photography started. The movie's opened, it's now coming out on DVD. When you went into this project, what were your expectations, and how have the results of the last 2 years varied from those expectations?
Well, I set the bar very low, because we're
continue to do so.
playing dwarves, so
Yeah, I mean, it's you go into it with having seen Lord of the Rings and the success of that, and what Pete did with those films, and you go in with a lot of faith, and spent 18 months having a bit of a crack, really, don't you?
Yeah, I mean, I had no idea because I wasn't a Tolkien fan as a kid. I mean, I didn't. The Hobbit wasn't introduced to me. I come from a family of educators, but The Hobbit didn't play a part in my life. Lord of the Rings didn't actually play a huge part in my life. I mean, I heard you were in it, and I thought, no, I don't fancy that. And so I kind of went in quite naive, and also because, of course, when we met Peter, there was no script. It was an act of faith for him as a director, but it also was quite an act of faith for us to kind of like take that jump. I mean, because it's a long jump and a significant jump because you're moving with your family to the other side of the world. But since the movie has come out, and since all that hype has disappeared from the cinema release, which was kind of frightening and hard not to be caught up in, what is fantastic on a daily basis is that kids are coming up to me wherever I am and talking about The Hobbit.
Can I just ask you about your characters and how you approached your characters?
I think it was interesting because I didn't really know. I mean, and you know, in the book, I mean, Thorin is quite separate from the rest of us, kind of in the book, because I mean he speaks. He kind of is defined. I mean, I think what's fascinating about Pete and Fran, his life partner and his creative partner, is that the challenge they were faced was to try and create 13 individuals, 13 different characters, 13 different looks. I think the way they did that was to match their imagination with the actors that they'd cast. They wanted us all to bring a bit of ourselves, you know. So the process was difficult at times, but also it was a pleasure to be able to bring bits. He's very collaborative, Pete, you know. But on a daily basis, we didn't often know what we were doing, but I think you could say the same thing about Pete. On a daily basis, he wasn't quite sure what he was doing.
Yeah, I mean, I did know the book from being a kid. I read it when I was 7, and I was on stage in a production when I was 13. So I was, in Birmingham. Alex.
What did you play?
I was an elf.
Oh.
I was kind of tall and
good
lanky at the time. So yeah, I mean, I'd kind of grown up with the characters, but at the time I was more interested in Bilbo, and going back to it as an adult, focusing on Thorin was interesting because he's got a complicated psychology, and you know, I did go into other Tolkien works to see how that character evolved in his mind as a writer, and so there was a big body of work to look at. But as Jimmy said, you know, it becomes collaborative, and I really feel with Pete, Fran and Philippa that they hear their actors' voices and they start to write for them, and it evolves in a really brilliant way. And I remember that the scenes that we were doing in Bag End when Beaufort has all that great stuff about the fire-breathing dragon and the teeth-like razors, and I remember there was a moment where it was about to be lost, and you totally sold it to them that it should remain, and it's one of those moments that you kind of remember in Bag End. And I think in terms of telling that long story, all of the investment that happened in Bag End is really going to pay off when it comes to the third film.
I think that's right.
Do you think, as a group, as the Dwarves, can you just try and explain to the iTunes audience what it was like on a day-to-day sort of level in terms of the dynamic of the group as actors and as characters? I mean, because what I think they maybe not appreciate is you probably never saw each other day in, day out as yourselves.
No,
once you got the prosthetics on.
I think that's a really good question, and we were surprised to catch sight of each other out of prosthetic. I mean, we recognised each other as dwarves more than we recognised each other as individuals and as actors. But I think the dynamic, the journey, you know, I mean, the Hobbit's call it, the first part is an unexpected journey, and it was an unexpected journey for all of us. And the marriage between 13 actors getting together to play 13 dwarves, both those identities going on this journey together, was very important that we bonded, and we did bond hugely. And you know, occasionally, of course, like a family or a brotherhood, there were fallings out. There were at times we needed to be separated, but we were always brought back together, not just by the call shoot. We were brought back together by the country, the journey, by New Zealand, by Middle Earth, and by our conscious and subconscious need to be kind of knit together, you know, and there was Richard leading us, you know, and so it's, if I think about it in those terms, it's actually quite moving to me in a sense, you know.
It's interesting how because of the, you know, what we were going through in terms of prosthetics and weight of costume, it became like a battle for survival. And I remember everyone checking out each other's call times because that extra 10 minutes in bed meant so much. And I think because we all knew what each other was going through, there was a real camaraderie.
Yeah. Peter is an incredibly, in my mind, an incredibly inclusive filmmaker in all respects, whether it be making it behind the scenes constantly to share with an audience and really show process, whether it's including the actors in a collaborative way in decision making about character. And I just wondered if you just Pete as a person and the energy that he brings to set every day, the normality of him as a human being with this kind of amount of responsibility on his shoulders.
I think there's a complicated notion about that, though, because he is incredibly inclusive, he's incredibly collaborative. He is the fan, the biggest fan that got to make the movie, you know. Yet, I'm a 48-year-old man who was on a daily basis still quite in awe of him. You know, I mean, it's because he is incredibly inclusive, but you can't help but want to please him and want to kind of win his admiration. And I think that's a nice thing about him. But he's a complicated soul, I think, because I mean he is this down-to-earth, Hobbity, Tolkien-esque kind of thrown together person, but who looks at it with a kid's eyes and a kid's wonder, but he's still in charge.